1 second, please.
It actually shows us that we're live before it shows you that we're live.
Okay.
We're live and live and live.
Greetings, everybody. I'm Nate Angel, and I am acting as a virtual buddy for this virtually connecting this conversation for the Open Without a Cause conversation. And I'm here with my fellow virtual buddy, Kate Malloy. Say hi, Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Malloy, and I'm coming in from the dead center of Ireland on a rainy night.
We have a whole collection of folks who are here, and we'll do introductions in just a minute. But I thought we might start things off by having our other colleague, Christian, give a little bit of background about why we're meeting today and what the conversation is about.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Nate. I'll try and keep this brief. It's usually, I don't usually keep things brief, but I hope that Laura and Audrey might be able to step in as they have been participating on site as well. So the brief history of the event that we had in November at Wikimedia, that we partnered with ALT, the Association for Learning Technology in the UK, with Maren Deepwell, Martin Hoxie, because when we in May were in Lisbon at the Creative Commons Summit, we discovered that lots of interesting and cool people would be in Berlin at around that time, and we thought we might just try and kick off a brief and informal event that would ask critical questions around openness and participation in society and teaching and learning. And that's when it came about that we thought we would do this at the Wikimedia offices, and that's basically what we did. So we had a late afternoon, a night at Wikimedia, where we had different short contributions by Audrey, by Laura, but also by Maren and Martin Hoxie, who were in the earlier Missed Conversation session. And then later on, we had a panel that was supposed to go deeper into the questions that we discussed. I think I linked to the recordings of the event on the blog post that announced this session as well. But I'd be happy to hear what Laura and Lorna will be adding to my just very brief summary, I guess.
And maybe before we do that, why don't we do a quick round of introductions? So just to kick it off again, I'm Nate Angel. I work for the nonprofit Hypothesis that stewards open annotation technologies and practices. I'm here in sunny Portland, Oregon. And Kate already introduced herself. Rebecca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Rebecca Howe. I'm a co-director at Virtually Connecting, and I am an associate lecturer at UMass Boston, but I live in Sunnyvale, California.
How about Maha?
Hi, I'm Maha Bailey. I am also a co-director of Virtually Connecting, and I'm here in Cairo, Egypt, which is going to be stormy weather the next couple of days. So we have tomorrow off because of stormy weather, not because of Corona, which is interesting.
That's different. Okay, how about Christian?
Well, hi, me again. I'm Christian. I'm also a co-director of Virtually Connecting. I have, I think, 2.5 weeks left as the Education and Science Advisor at Wikimedia Germany, or Wikimedia Deutschland, as we like to say. And I think, as far as I know, I just received a notification that our offices will be closed starting next week, Monday. So everybody will be working from home, as far as I can tell.
Wow, everybody's got different news here. Sadiq, how about yourself?
Hello, my name is Sadiq. I'm based in Accra, Ghana. I've been involved in Wikimedia Ghana projects and Creative Commons Ghana chapter. I'm also a co-founder of Global Open Initiative Foundation. Also, I'm a Mozilla Open EDSX trainee working to build open educational resources in Ghana. Thank you.
Welcome, Sadiq. How about Christina?
Hello, I'm Christina Calhoun, and I'm the instructional designer for the Oklahoma State University Libraries. And I actually live in Mobile, Alabama, and work remotely for them. So I already work from home and don't have to worry about the coronavirus.
Hopefully, knock on wood for that. How about Lucy?
Hi, I'm Lucy Talents. My background is in academia and wildlife conservation, but I've released myself from that golden cage, and now I'm setting up my new business called Verdant Learn, which right now is focusing on giving people virtual networking opportunities if their conferences or events have been cancelled because of coronavirus. And as of Friday, we are going to be working from home.
Great. Glad to know that people are able to respond to the crisis in different ways. How about Lorna?
Just hang on a second, Lucy, where are you?
Sorry, I'm based in Belfast now, UK.
Hi there, I'm Lorna Campbell. I work at the University of Edinburgh in Information Services, but I live in Glasgow and I actually work from home half the time anyway. But I haven't been working for the last fortnight because I've been on strike as part of the University and College Union strike. I'm also a trustee of Wikimedia UK and the Association for Learning Technology. And I'm here this evening with my cat, Josh, who is also joining the call, as you can see there.
Greetings, George. Great to know. And what about, we haven't heard from Laura yet.
I'm in Cape Town in South Africa. And Christian, you forgot to mention the cat wall. The most interesting
I did.
thing was they had this cat wall. I think we all need to see this cat wall.
I'll go and look up the tweets that we send out and see if I can find them. So just give me a second. The cat wall shall not be missed.
Great, and it looks like Audrey Waters was able to rejoin us again. Audrey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm sorry for, I think I said something mean about Zoom online. And so that of course meant that despite everyone's rousing endorsement of this piece of video conferencing software, magically it wouldn't work for me. So yeah, I'm Audrey Waters. I'm a writer. I have a website called Hack Education, and soon a book out by MIT Press called Teaching Machines.
And really good stuff. I highly recommend Audrey's work. I noticed that Autumn has also joined us. So we have, I think, do we have all the Virtually Connecting co-founders? Autumn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey guys, I'm Autumn Keynes. I'm an instructional designer at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. I am a co-founder, co-director of Virtually Connecting. And I didn't think I was going to be able to make it. And then at the last minute, a meeting happened earlier, and then I'm here. I'm really excited.
Well, and Kate, did you want to add anything else to your introduction before we switch it over to Laura and Audrey to get a little bit more of context around the Open with the Cause, for a Cause, sorry. Okay, well, Laura, did you want to start off by saying putting some context around our conversation?
So this is the terrible thing because I don't remember the details, but I do remember what I was talking about. Because I was trying to talk about how to be critically open when you're an insider in an institution and you're trying to make change. So I've got all these different hats. So I can be a researcher and I can be a professor and I can do all that. And then the other hat is the director of the center and sitting on all the committees and sitting on the university senate. And so I have this idea that I call myself a critical pragmatist. And that's a really difficult balancing act. And so I was trying to reflect honestly on how do you do that? How do you actually kind of keep some sense of integrity and keep your because there are things you can write as a researcher that is very different from what you have to do when you're in committee meetings. I mean, this is something Kate Bowles and I have talked about a lot because she also has that kind of role as part of her work. So how do you do that? How do you negotiate and mediate and push for change within the internal structures? So I don't know if anyone remembers that, but that's what I was trying to talk about, and that's something that is often on my mind, and certainly something I'd like to share with other people and talk to other people about.
That makes great sense. Well, I know Audrey was at the actual event itself. Did you want to give us some context around your participation too, Audrey?
It's funny, I was so jet lagged when I gave my talk. I literally cannot tell you what I spoke about. I know I was there. I remember I was sitting next to Lorna and Laura. Christian introduced us, and I really have absolutely no idea what I talked about. Oh, Martin was there as well. I remember that you know, one of the things that Martin Hoxie ended up talking about was surveillance and how surveillance works with open. And I mean, partially because I've been working on this book, Teaching Machines, on the history of education technology. I've been really interested in thinking about how behavioral engineering also works with open, and what are some of the practices I think that we're being conditioned to do that I think that we talk about as being progressive and positive. The adjective open, I think, does a lot of work for us that we don't always spell out exactly what we mean. But just thinking about how software design is sort of really prompting us to hand over a lot of our personal data, a lot of our personal content, and you know, just the way in which I think we're being, you know, engineered by the software to behave in certain ways, to click on certain things. I guess, yeah. I think other than that, I have no idea what I talked about that night.
Lorna, you were there too, right?
I was indeed, yes. And I think it's quite a coincidence because when I was, sorry, excuse the tail, while I was there, I was actually on strike that week as well. That was the second round of the UCU strikes. We're now in the third round of strikes. And I'd had a big dilemma about whether to go to the event because I was on strike at the time. And one of the things that I was talking about and I was particularly interested in is when our working lives are so tied up in quite personal commitments, whether it's to open education or whether it's to organizations like Wikimedia chapters or organizations like ALT, where you draw the line in what is your work can be quite difficult to sort of make these judgments. And I absolutely agree with what Audrey was saying there, that quite often when we are working in the open domain, we give a lot of ourselves away, whether that's in terms of our labor or our data or our time. But I also agree with what Laura was saying about needing sort of pragmatic approaches for how we can actually sort of work within our institutions and hopefully try and change them from the inside so they are more equitable and provide better working conditions for staff. I'm sorry about this. So yeah, so that's kind of, oh, he's gone now. That's kind of where I was coming from.
That makes sense. And Christian, you were there too, right?
I think so, yeah.
And you did say something already, but is your memory coming back?
It is slowly coming back. I think it sounds like almost like a sad event where everybody had to struggle with some kind of personal problem or issue. But I assure you that I don't think it didn't feel to me like that. What I was struggling with though was a severe cold, a man flu, and hence I wasn't able to. I don't know. I don't think I was being completely myself and throughout the event. What I remember though was that I think we managed to hear and give room to lots of different perspectives on open and on criticality around open. So what Audrey mentioned about Martin's perspective, how openness and surveillance are linked. Laura, as the critical pragmatist is the terminology in ways of how you make incremental changes, incremental progress over long like with what we in Germany call a horse's lung, basically. So in a very enduring manner, actually. But also different perspectives from the strike that Lorna just brought up, and also Audrey's perspective on what I remember, that the room was dead silent when she just said, well, most of the software that we use is shit. And there were plenty of people in the room where who I would have not been exposed to that line of thought, basically, that you really need to critically question everything that happens in learning, in online learning, and in higher ed, but also in other places, from different kinds of, be it structures and ways that we set up institutions, to the ways that we fund software, to the ways that we develop praxis around all of that, or content. And I think that's something that everybody in the room was really eager to wrap their heads around together.
Well, I don't need to act it. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add, I'm sorry if the analogy with the horse's lung didn't really work. It's
I think it's like a marathon runner.
It's one of
Isn't
those
that the
things
kind
where
of- Is it like a marathon runner, like just someone who can stay with it?
yeah, stay with it and won't give up.
Got it.
It was weird, but it's understandable, like the analogy.
Yeah, I get it now. At first I was confused. Well, I don't need to act as a traffic cop for a conversation.
Yeah.
We have so many.
I wanted to jump in. Yeah, I wanted to jump in because the term that Laura said, this critical pragmatist, it really struck me, and I tweeted about this, and I said Laura is my role model in this, because Laura is someone who is an administrator who manages, direct a center for learning and teaching, and yet she's manages to be a critical researcher at the same time. And it's a really difficult balance, and it's something that I think a lot of us struggle with and aspire to. But I always imagine myself, or I think people around me imagine me as someone who could never be an administrator because of the critical research aspect of who I am. And this week especially, I'm trying to make that balance as we try to help the university. And at the same time, I want to maintain the care aspect, but we have to finish numbers of getting faculty ready for potential closure, for example. And thinking about also what Audrey said about all the software being problematic, and then you need to train people on the software and then let them know, yes, I know this is not perfect. And trying to make all that. And at the same time, I'm also thinking about what Lorna was saying. It all fits in one story in my head right now. What Lorna is saying about what is work and what is not work. So for me, this meeting is like a relief from the work of the day. So I'm staying up at night to talk to you guys because it's going to make my well-being better. And Mia Zamora and I are trying to organize conversations. Again, it's a work to organize conversations with our community, but it's relieving us from the other work that we're doing in the morning. So just thinking about all of those things right now. I don't think I've added anything, but just to let you all know that everything you've said resonated with me.
I'm watching a Twitter stream here and going by for COVID campus. And I mean, every few seconds, there's another like gigantic announcement about either how an entire university or school is moving to online learning. They're telling students not to come home from spring break, even at schools where people don't go anywhere, like community colleges. And there's also like a constant stream of tips and ideas about what to do. And it seems like we're kind of at the brink of a gigantic sea change for moving to online learning right now that nobody's really controlling. And it just seems like that what will happen after this is going to be really interesting. Like if the virus crisis subsides and that tide washes away, what's going to be left in its wake?
So can I just sort of pick up on some of these things? Because I think what Maha you were talking about is like, how do you live permanently with extreme ambivalence? And the most extreme case of it for us is when the universities in South Africa went online because of the student protests. So you had an exceptionally fragmented community. I would think that in this particular case, everyone agrees that there is a virus, and it's, however, I mean, I don't know how much people agree about the virus and what you should or shouldn't do, but the point about the student protests is that it was deeply polarizing. So going online was an extremely controversial and deeply political decision. And I mean, in the case of running our center, the vice chancellor didn't actually tell us. He announced it. We read about it. And suddenly we were scrambling to have to help people. And we were very ambivalent about doing it at all. So that's kind of the most extreme kind of and we've just published a paper where we interviewed academics about how they felt about it, and conflicted. Was it even the right thing to do? Were we undermining the student protests by doing that? The students weren't a homogenous group anyway, so what, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I was going somewhere with this, but I don't think we can even continue this conversation without talking about the virus and our roles going online. I mean, I know we're supposed to be talking about the Wikimedia event, but actually this is like quintessentially puts a finger on the nature of our roles, and our responsibilities, and where they do or don't lie, and do we even have room to reflect on it, or do we just have to act? And in a way, I think that would be really useful or interesting to talk about. How do you deal with that? I mean, I had assumed that at my university this would be much less controversial, but in fact it isn't. I mean, there's still tensions, and not in quite the same way, because I don't think people feel like, I mean, some people accused us of being sellouts, so this is complex stuff. And in fact, it was a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation, actually.
And
but anyway, I'm trying to just sort of open that up for how do you live with this extreme ambivalence and tension at the moment?
And I think that we have an interesting challenge ahead of us as well, because everybody in the world going online all at once, right? Like that's just going to crash everything that's out there, right? Like we don't have the capacity for the numbers that we're talking about, like the universities that have like, maybe 5% of their students online, and all of a sudden they're trying to go to 100%. It's a bit crazy, and the mythology around it too, because we focus so much on what do we need to do to get our faculty ready. Well, what about the students? Because there's that whole digital native myth out there, right? Like the students don't know how to learn online either, right? And so there's so much behind making that work that people, I feel like it's getting left out there in that sudden transition.
Yeah. Well, and then also people like us who've been working in this area for a long time know that it takes a lot of time and thoughtfulness and practice and experimentation to be able to create a good online experience. And then here we are being required to support, a lot of us are in supporting roles where we're being required to support faculty to figure it out in a week and throw them out there. And so, and that's why this theme of care for both the faculty, the teachers, and the students, none of whom are ready for this. And one of the things that I think, and Sarah Goldrick wrote a little bit about this, but I was also thinking in my context here in Egypt, is that a lot of people think, oh, let's just do a synchronous meeting on Zoom or Blackboard Collaborate or whatever those tools are. And then I keep telling them, but what if a home has 3 kids and a teacher in the home? What kind of internet connection in Egypt would tolerate 4 people being on a synchronous call at the same time? You can't just ask that, ask everyone to replace everything with synchronous calling and assume that's going to work out, because that's not going to work out, and it's not necessarily the best way to do it. And And at the same time, it's again like what Laura's saying, it's partly like your administration is requiring you to do something that you know is not going to work. And yet you need to do something, right? Because you can't not do anything. So it's this, do you just do it? Do you just be pragmatic?
But you're also probably not thinking very critically about what those tools are, or, you know, I guess it's a question, right? Are you able to really think about like, well, how much data am I giving? How much, you know, is this tool going to take from me? And, you know, what can I use a different tool? You know, if you're in this emergency mindset, you're just kind of using what works and moving forward with it. I don't know if you really have time to think about some of that, some of those more critical questions. And that's why, you know, to Laura's point about being at an institution and being that critical voice at that institution, thinking about what are because there's the tools that we point people to, there's the tools that we advocate for. And that's why it becomes really important. I don't think that I've become kind of cynical a little bit lately, and feeling like nothing's really going to make anything necessarily perfect, but maybe we can make it a little less bad. So I do think it becomes important as far as what tools we advocate for and what tools we consider speaking for. If you're even, I mean, I'm an instructional designer and I've been at my institution for just over a year now. So it's not like I have a ton of leverage in that position and with that kind of history with the institution, but I definitely think it makes a difference, right? And just being the person, even if you're the only person in the room who's saying, well, wait a minute, how does that company make money? And yeah, maybe it's a free tool, but what are they doing with the data? And how much advertising are students going to be exposed to through the use of this tool? And what if we used this instead? Or what if we invested in a tool like this instead? So that way we're paying for it rather than our students paying for it. I don't know. It's a lot. I just wanted to chime in.
So I just want to go back to what you were saying, Maha. I think if it had been very clear to me and us, because we talked about it a lot at the time, that the senior, like the vice chancellor, was wrong, it would have been easier. I don't mean easier because, you know, standing up and telling the vice chancellor you refuse to do something is not easy. But from the level of principle, it would have been possible. But it wasn't just and even in this case, it's not just the powers people actually saying, we want, why get so conflicted, because which voice do you respond to? And how do you do this when you know you're doing it badly? It becomes what Autumn was saying, you try and make it less bad. And I think one of the things that I try to do, so there's this kind of wearing different hats things, but so for example, I just showed you the article that we wrote. I just put a researcher hat on at the same time in the middle of the crisis and went, let's get a researcher out there and interview the academics, because there is something here, there is a story, there's something we can learn about, and I'm going to, and that partly kept me sane. You know, that I'm going to use this as a learning experience. And of course, the academics, we didn't manage to get that many academics who would even find the time to talk and reflect. But there was some value in doing that.
Well, and also they feel like you care about what they think,
well,
because most of the
sense
time
of
nobody asks them.
In terms of what Audrey and Autumn were saying about choices about software and privacy and the kind of difficult way that interacts with openness, I guess what concerns me about the current situation, and particularly as I now sit in the business world and not the academic world, is that the companies that are going to be best able to scale up the services that we need to move online are those which I have the greatest skepticism about the way they value the people who they're providing the service to, or what value they get out of them, and whether that respects the rights of the people who are using those services. So I kind of feel that right now with my startup, it's very early stages, and I'm making business decisions based on what's going to allow me to set up my business whilst knowing that I'm making compromises in terms of, okay, well, if I use this suite of tools, they work really well together because certain large companies have put a lot of effort into making that happen. But I don't want to be making those decisions for my students. So I want to remain aware of what tools are out there that are more privacy respecting, but I don't feel that I know enough at this stage to make those decisions.
I was wondering if Audrey might want to weigh in with her thinking around maybe not just how to find tools, but also what to do without tools or besides tools or outside tools.
I think that that's going to be probably one of the most important things that we can consider right now. And I'm glad that Maha, you brought up this care, because I've been it's like one of those things where like the universe is like, oh, this is your media moment, right? And so I've been doing a lot of interviews the last couple of days, particularly since I'm in Seattle, which in the US is sort of, I guess, ground zero for a lot of this. The University of Washington canceled classes starting last week, and the school district just canceled classes today. And the thing that I've been trying to tell people, and this is a very tech-oriented city, right? Amazon, Microsoft, but lots of other tech companies have offices here. And so there has been a lot of pushback from the public saying they don't understand why isn't everyone already learning online? And a journalist asked me yesterday, isn't this going to be great? Because now we can just get rid of schools. And as you can imagine, I almost smacked him, but I I didn't. But I think the most important thing that we can think about right now is how to do this with an ethic of care, because this is a crisis. This is an emergency situation, and I think we have to think about how we're responding to a crisis, and there isn't really an app that's going to address any of this. This is a human problem. This isn't a technological problem. There are ways in which I think we can think about using technology, but I don't even want that to be a top 5 consideration. We have so many other things that have to happen for students, certainly, but also for staff and teachers, to make sure that we're all okay right now, that getting too caught up in whether or not we want to use Zoom or whether or not, what tools we're using is, I'm not sure that that's the right thing. I mean, I think a lot of families are going to be very soon in great crisis. And so the simple things are going to be picking up the phone and calling and making sure the students are doing okay, finding other ways to check in on people, because I mean, I think as Maha said, like there's just no way, even in an affluent household in Seattle, let's say with parents who are able to work from home in the tech sector, it gets very complicated very quickly when you're expecting people to spend all day on devices. It's just not going to happen, particularly when there are questions about health and where's the food, and apparently do we have 3 months of toilet paper stocked up, seems to be the top priority for many Americans right now. And so I feel as though, I mean, I recognize that people, particularly in ed tech, we want to come up with a list of tools and a list of suggestions and tips and tricks, and here's how to share your screen on Zoom. But I think that that's not great, but that's not what we need to be thinking about right now. I think we really need to be thinking about compassion and care on a deeply human level. And I think that that's got to be what we focus on more than anything right now.
I'd certainly agree with what Audrey was saying, and in fact, what my hand Laura have already said about this issue of care being really critical. I think it's always critical in education, but more so now than ever. But I think one of the things that concerns me a bit is that the burden of care in institutions isn't evenly distributed. And I think, you know, we're all well aware of the people in our institutions who carry the weight of that burden. And it's, you know, it's frequently, it's women, it's scholars of colour, it's people who are on hourly paid teaching contracts, it's those who are in the lower grades. And again, this has been one of the real issues for the strike in the UK. It's dealing with these unacknowledged workload issues. And again, it comes back to this issue that sort of digital labour is so frequently unacknowledged and unrewarded. And when you add on to that this burden of care, then it's putting enormous stress on quite a small number of staff who are the ones who do have the expertise to get people online and who are the ones who always go the extra mile to care for their colleagues and to care for their students. And I think that's something that we really need our institutions to be cognizant of. And I don't think that's going to happen, particularly when everyone is scrambling to get everything online, that this issue of, you know, who is doing the caring, who is carrying that burden is just going to get forgotten. I had a wee thing in Wonky earlier on this week about this issue of the unacknowledged digital labour that is caring in education.
I mean, I just think that there's a confluence of things happening right at the moment. So and I don't think we can say this is the, I mean, I think it's fine to say these are the various things, but I think the point Lucy made about being forced to use particular version 2, because they can scale up, really reminds me and emphasizes how we have failed. And I don't mean like let's bang ourselves on the back, but how we've failed to come up with scalable open source solutions, how the different kinds of models of infrastructure, because there is a room for this kind of digital technology that can enable care. But and you know, I just refuse to accept that I'm going to die having been drowned by market forces. So part of me actually wants to fight back by working on these kinds of models of different kinds of open issue. I want to have scalable solutions. I mean, I was running a workshop today and I wanted to not use Google Docs. And I put a thing on Twitter, some of you might have seen it, and someone said, yeah, there's this thing called CryptPad and the French government's just invested in it. And I wanted to use it for my workshop for 40 people and it didn't work. I just couldn't bear it. You know, I want to say to people, don't use Zoom, don't use Google Docs. Use these other things. And we have failed to come up with these alternative models, and it just makes me tear my hair. So at that level, I actually want this to be an impetus to getting that open infrastructure and that open technology in place. And it's not saying I'm disagreeing with the things that you've said, because it points to all of these things about contract labor, casualization, that people are just going to not have income because they're on these short-term contracts, which is terrifying. You know, in our sector, our colleagues, people we know, human beings, who we will all be caring for in some way or another. I mean, that's another layer .
And Laura, now that we seem to have lost you for a longer period than we normally have, your audio and video has popped in and out a little bit. So I don't know if there's anything you can do to might be a network issue.
I think to pick up the point that Laura was making when she cut out there about this, I think this is really where the casualisation of the education sector is really going to come back and bite, because it's so much of the I mean, I was talking about the burden of care earlier on, but the kind of like the teaching load, just even the teaching load is carried by graduate teaching assistants, you know, all kinds of people on short-term contracts, early paid. And in many places, these people do not have any security. They might not be eligible for sick pay. You know, it varies institution to institution, country by country. But I think it's kind of this, the market forces that have been sort of propelling education forward, I think are really going to, they're really going to have an enormously negative impact at this point in time. Because what is going to happen to these people?
Perhaps the cat.
I love the cat theme of this call. I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's just, it amazes me.
Very distracting.
Sorry.
Laura's back. I was also saying in the chat that you said something bad about Zoom, so they cut you off.
I can go fetch my dog if you like.
Yes, need more dogs on the call.
Okay, so talking about how the coronavirus is affecting conferences across the world. Today I saw in one of the posts on my Facebook timeline that coronavirus conference get cancelled because of coronavirus. It was kind of like funny. And I think Abigail from Mozilla Foundation also shared some useful tips on how people can you know, use online platforms like Zoom and virtually connecting and other forms of online engagement to, you know, host conferences so that people may, you know, still join, but they may not need to travel all to other places where they will be exposed to this kind of virus. So, but the challenge is the tools and the softwares with regards to education, how there are some people who may have the opportunity to, you know, experience those platforms in their various campuses, but places where things like this don't even exist, like the program we did in Navrongo UDS, most of the students were, you know, very new to this online engagement, and they were really, you know, surprised about some of the things. Just a basic Zoom call like this, they were really excited. So I think some people are still at disadvantage with these things, these new technologies, especially people from the global south. And of course, talking about connectivity, how difficult it is to access internet. As I'm talking now, I'm having some internet pitches here and there. So if we are talking about moving online or, you know, taking advantage of online classes, how would that benefit people who may not have, you know, the capacity, or they don't have the opportunity to, you know, use these tools or technologies?
I think that, I think that this is such a real concern, even in a wealthy country like the United States. And I know it's been at the top of a lot of schools' minds when they, well, not all schools, but many schools' minds when they make these decisions to move online. Students don't all have computers. A lot of them do all of their schoolwork on their phone. And if they don't have access to Wi-Fi, using something like Zoom will chew up your your data plan pretty quickly when you're expected to, you know, participate in 3 classes with 3 video conferencing sessions a week. Access to printers and and so I think that there are those technological things, but then there are all of the other services that that schools provide in addition to instructional time. You know, in Seattle, for example, where they just closed the school district, a third of the students live below the poverty line. And so they get 2 meals, sometimes 3 meals a day at school. So when you close school, it means there are hungry children. And for colleges, it's similar too. I mean, there are a lot of resources that students at colleges need. I think that often there's a stereotype that college students are well off, and increasingly they're not. They're living, you know, their students are hungry, students are homeless in college, not just at lower levels. And so again, the idea that everyone's going to be able to participate in an online, in some sort of online lesson is just, it's just not feasible. It's just not feasible at all.
Well, not to mention if you're trying to do it while you're sick, or while your kid's sick, or while your parent is sick, or something like that. So, I mean, there's the digital side of it, but there's that human side of it too. I'm actually working from home. I think I'm mostly over it. I don't think it was COVID. I think it was just a flu or something like that. But, you know, I basically got sick last week, and I kind of thought, oh, it'll be all right. I'll just work from home. And then I realized I can't work from home. I'm on medication. Like, you know, like there's just no way. I'm sorry, I have to take a sick day today. Like the digital, even if the digital is working perfectly, it only gets you so far.
I'm sort of wondering if we step back to the points that Audrey was making about ensuring our focus stays on humanity. I'm wondering if there are certain things that we can kind of, you know, people are putting out all these tips about tools. Do we have a comparable set of tips about staying human?
Even some of the tips that we're trying to give our staff, you know, like any unit like CELT, we have a plethora of, you know, 36-page PDFs and that sort of thing for all that how-to stuff. But we put together something really short and sweet to tell people just how to step back and do some of the things that you folks have been talking about, and just in terms of simplifying, and even just going back to contacting students by email, because for instance, I'm in rural Ireland. My broadband connection is 3 meg. That's why I'm quiet tonight, because if I click on any of those links, my connection is going to become unstable. So I'll catch up on those things later. And a lot of students would have those issues. So the kind of stuff we've been releasing internally to staff was to remind them, like Audrey said, your students are on a phone. If they have to watch something or look at something, don't drain their data. Don't put too much text on a PowerPoint slide. Very simple things to kind of strip back and go back to basics, and just say, you know, don't front load everything with assessments and try to do things that students wouldn't have access to actually to work with. So we're hoping that, you know, it's kind of walking the line between all this tools and tip stuff that is coming out, and just trying to remind people to step back and care and be human about it, because the same thing will happen to me if I work from home, that I can do so much, but I can't do everything.
And I appreciate so much the reminder to say, are you okay? My daughter's teaching freshman comp for the first time, and she said, Mom, can you help me move online? Of course, I'm all excited. I'm like, this is my opportunity. And even this evening, I was thinking, well, sit down and I'll share all the cool stuff. And just that reminder that the most important thing is, are you okay? Are your students okay? That's going to completely change how I partner with her to do that, you know, and then she'll push that out to her colleagues. And so thank you for that reminder.
Just to jump in, I just keep picturing the scene in Harry Potter, and I can't remember which movie it is, but something horrible happens and they cancel exams for the end of the year, which is a ridiculous thing to think about in this situation. But I truly wish that we could do something like that, you know, where it's like, hey, this sucks. All of this sucks, and it's about to get much worse for a lot of people. And let's just, you know, not do this. But there are so many different levels of care that are at play that it's, you know, you kind of have to prioritize and choose. And so I'm happy for this conversation right here and right now, because right after this, I'm actually going into a meeting about planning for our library instruction online. And it's just a reminder that the different levels of care that there are involved here, and the different questions that are involved, and the different considerations. And as practitioners of open, we need to, there's so many things we're already prioritizing, you know, like the students' privacy, asking these critical questions about things, that we're already operating at this level of, okay, let's take things apart to the nano piece. And then now there's no time to do that. And so kind of just learning or just remembering the questions and focus of things. So yes, thank you.
So, I mean, the other thing is, you know how people always say that
Oh, we lost you again, Laura.
Yes, a total cliffhanger. How they say.
She was going to say something really great right then. I am thinking though, you know, Christina, going back to your point, if we do interrupt things for students, there are some of them who may not make it back. I mean, people's academic careers can be kind of fragile too. So
this is actually one of my huge concerns. And I think, again, why we need to prioritize the care. You know, I mean, I think we know, I mean, I think that obviously, you know, folks who join a call like this move forward with their use of education technology with a great deal of compassion and ethics. But I think by and large, a lot of the research does suggest that online learning isn't great for the most vulnerable students. So good students will do fine, vulnerable students won't. And we're moving, this is like I said, this is a crisis. And suddenly a lot more students are vulnerable students. And so I think that this is going to be particularly damaging for a lot of students. My stepdaughter, for example, I mean, I think about her, she's a freshman. If she has to go online, it's just not going to be great for her. She's just not she needs, I think she just needs a lot of human support. And she's, I mean, she has the technology. She has, you know, her needs are being met. I just think that she just needs a lot of human support. And I think that we're going to find a lot of students are suddenly struggling. And then there's all of these other issues that we're going to have to face. I mean, I'm watching schools cancel their athletics, and yay, less human contact, but that's also how students are funding their education. So we ask students to go online. Up until yesterday, if you were an international student, you weren't allowed to take online classes in the US in order to maintain your visa. And so there are, I think that, again, I think that we have to prioritize, I mean, obviously we want to prioritize good pedagogy, but I think there are just a lot of other things that we're going to have to think about how we're navigating. And a lot of the rules are going to have to go out the window. And that means we're going to have to be even louder, agitating for ethical behavior and compassionate behavior from institutions that we know have a really lousy track record of behaving that way.
So can you hear me now?
Right when Laura asked that, then she froze.
Okay,
I wonder,
so
Laura,
what I need to,
I wonder if you maybe turned off your video, Laura. That might
okay,
help conserve bandwidth a little, even though I'd love
okay,
to keep seeing you too.
okay, so let's try that.
Okay,
Is that better?
seems to work so far. Give it a try.
Okay, so I just wanted to pick up on it's a similar point to what Audrey was saying about taking the opportunity. So I think companies take the opportunity to make money, but I think we should take the opportunity to leverage the crisis for good. So for example, during the protests in South Africa, we negotiated with the cell phone companies to provide free data to students. And I think we should be doing things like that. So, I mean, it means putting pressure on the kinds of people who do those kinds of negotiations, but you can take it to Senate, you can take it to, you know, various committees. You can say to companies, yeah, you can, you know, we want to sign up, but we can't sign up to your current terms and conditions. We don't have the usual time to agree to all of that small print, so we're just not going to. So you're getting a kind of an in, but we're not going to sign all of those terms and conditions. We actually have to persuade the powers that be in our universities to just put a moratorium on that. So I think we have to also be clever about how we negotiate things that work for us during this period.
Yeah, we actually struggled with that quite a bit at Hypothesis because we wanted to help somehow as an organization. We're a little different because we're a nonprofit, but at the same time, we saw so many for-profit organizations kind of using this crisis as a chance to jump in with like a free coupon, you know, we'll charge you later kind of offer. And so we were very reluctant to just kind of jump in any way. We eventually just decided to end all charges to all educational institutions for at least the rest of the year, and then try to figure things out later with people in a kind of, you know, hopefully authentic, reasonable way. But it's you know, I see so many companies just jumping on this as an opportunity to get more customers with a free coupon for a couple of months or something like that.
So I think universities must just refuse to do that. We must actually say to people, you know, we won't do that. Because you're trying to behave ethically as a company. I think we have to force people, if they want this potential business opportunity, this is their opportunity to show that they can behave ethically and actually insert some of that. So it's part of this. For once, someone has to listen. You know, it's the one moment that they do actually have to listen.
And I think this is a good way for us to use our voice as well. This is a moment that they have to shine. Like, are you going to act ethically? How are you going to act? And then remember that, you know, once the crisis, the moment of crisis has passed and we're back to business as usual, whatever that might look like, you know, after this has passed, reminding and being vocal about that, because we do have a voice and we do have, you know, it's not safe for all of us to speak up in our workplaces or have a spot to, or a person that they can speak up to. But bringing up, hey, remember when this happened and the email that I got in my inbox and the code they gave us or the data that was stolen at that time because we got free accounts, you know, this is time to take note of that. And remember, I was speaking with a vendor, a pretty big vendor today, who said, if you see any of that from us, please let us know, because that's disgusting and it makes us sick. And so I was encouraged by that. And so I thought to myself, okay, well, let me just keep an eye on it, because, you know, there is that also opportunity of, oh, if we play nice right now, maybe they'll like us later. So it's, you know, you just never know. You never know. You just always have to critically be questioning and remembering, you know, the steps people are taking and the things they're saying. And yeah, it never stops, the questioning.
And can I just say one more thing and then I'll stop, because I think this thing about researching the moment is really important. And so I think we should also be using all our connections with funding organizations to actually get researchers out there talking to people and tracking how companies are behaving and interviewing people about what they're experiencing. And so we have a record of this. So, I think that's something else that we can do.
It's an interesting, this has just been an interesting conversation because I've been going through this dilemma myself as somebody who is an adjunct, but also has expertise in online learning. And I was given an opportunity, well, I was mentioned an opportunity, somebody mentioned to me yesterday of well, do you want to do some contract work? Because we've, our people in the Center for Learning and Teaching are slammed right now. And how much of that is like, oh, I could like launch my whole contract business based upon this opportunity, and how wrong that would be at the same time. And yet, so there's that struggle happens at, we can look at companies being unethical, but it also happens at the individual level as well. How do you, you still have to make a living, you still have to pay your bills, you still have to do all of those things. And yet you don't want to be the vulture at the same time. And so it is actually just an interesting personal dilemma, as well as a company, as well as an organizational dilemma, especially when you know that you're somebody that is typically taken advantage of by the system.
Right. Well, and how are you careful on the user end? Because like you're talking about hypothesis, and we've got the key or whatever, that we've got 3 or 4 classes using the integration to kind of make a case for a pilot. And I'd been thinking, man, this is a great time. Maybe should we, contact them and give the key to a few more people, and then we can really make the case for the pilot. But at the same time, you're like, it's not fair to ask that question. They need to pay their developers. They need to go home and have dinner with their families. And so how do you balance that and also be considerate of the people that are on the other end of these platforms, staying up late, writing the code, figuring things out, and also needing to pay their bills? But we appreciate, Nate, what you're doing very much.
Well, Kathy, just go for it. We'll figure it out later.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny. Care is so complex because those questions, when you're critically evaluating things, always asking who's being harmed, who's benefiting from this, what structures are in place, what hierarchies are here, and the answer is not always very clear cut, like we just heard just now, like it's from Rebecca, like it is not clear cut. It's not.
And in some sense, I just feel like the struggle, if you're wondering if you're doing something right or if you're doing something wrong, if you're not struggling with the question, then that's a clear indication that, like, because it is so complex. So, I mean, it's hard, right? I mean, the best that you can do sometimes is to just think about this stuff, be the voice in the room who brings these questions up, who thinks about these other perspectives, and think about this kind of stuff. I think that's really the best we can do.
And just to quickly throw in the theme of self-care, maybe. So people tend to burn out asking these questions, and if you're constantly being the only one in the room who asks those kinds of questions, chances are you're not going to be asking them 6 months from then on. So that's what I liked about your talk, Laura, at the event itself, but also about your remarks here in the call about being both pragmatic and but also critical and ethical at the same time.
Well, I am conscious that we've been talking for over an hour actually, and I want to be respectful of people's time, especially Maha, who may really need to go to bed. Happy to keep the conversation going for people who want to stay, but also want to give people a chance to maybe say something final and take their leave if they need to. So are there any really last words that people would like to share? George, maybe? That is the cat's name, isn't it?
Sorry, it was Josh.
Oh, Josh, sorry.
He's cleared off to get some food now. He's looking for somebody to care for him, obviously. I think that is kind of like, I think it's a theme that has come through, for what everyone's saying, is that I think we just need to make sure that we don't lose sight of this issue of caring, not just for our students, but for our colleagues and for ourselves as well. So that would certainly be what I've taken from all this. And I think we're all going to have to try and keep reminding ourselves of, as the pressure builds, that we do have to take care of one another.
And I need to jump out, but I just want to say I'm very thankful for everybody here, for all your voices, for, days are normally hard, but with things that come up, but the coming days are especially going to be hard. And it makes me feel good to know that you all are out there working and doing your thing. And I can, look up your resources, Twitter, see what you're doing and whatnot. And so just thank you.
I have to go, and I also wanted to thank everyone. I really needed this conversation. I am organizing one with Mia Zamora in a couple of days, just focused on this continuity with care theme. So we'll announce that pretty soon. And you're all welcome to join it as well and continue talking about this. But apparently I needed it even faster than 2 days from now. So this is going to keep me going for the next couple of days until that one. Thank you so much.
All right, anyone else want to say a formal goodbye? So this is going to close our missed conversation for virtually connecting. I'm going to go ahead and turn off our live stream now. That doesn't mean that you'll have to exit, but that will end the recording process. Thank you all for attending.